Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me this week are Jeff Ranke and Anna Wells. We each have more than 20 years of experience covering the manufacturing industry. Every week, we take the 5 most popular stories on our websites and discuss the implications they have on the industry going forward. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you want you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. We're also live every Thursday, so subscribe to us on YouTube at IN Magazine so you can get a notification and join us when we go live. Jeff, how you doing this week?
Better than average, David. How about you?
Better than average.
Better than average.
Setting a high bar, a solid 6 for Jeff. That's like a great and bad way. How's your week? Been a real 6 of a week. Real 6.
I mean, that's one way to look at it, I guess. I mean, usually say good. That's like things are,
Yeah.
like say better than that.
Okay, better than good.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll try to refine those responses.
Things are looking up.
There you go.
And how are you doing this week?
I'm kind of afraid to respond.
I'm sorry.
David's so judgmental now.
Yeah.
Jeez.
I'll just keep my feelings to myself.
Sounds good. I apologize for my toxic behavior on the panel today, guys. Let's jump into our sponsor. This week's episode is brought to you by ShopVue, a CAI Solution. Managers and engineers face a wide variety of obstacles on the plant floor that weaken productivity. The roots of these problems can often be tied to reliance on outdated data. Using yesterday's information to make today's decisions simply won't cut it. So download Benefits of Real-Time Production Monitoring in Manufacturing to find out why real-time production monitoring is becoming a must-have for manufacturers. All right, our first story this week. We are going to Ford. Ford's Mustangs are getting recalled to fix an issue caused by a previous recall. Last summer, Ford recalled more than 30,000 2022-2023 Mustangs due to a calibration issue with the secondary steering torque sensor. The problem could cause the steering wheel to start turning on its own. Now, the automaker has filed another recall with the NHTSA for 300 Mustangs that didn't have the update installed correctly, even though Ford's records say they received the repair. That means these vehicles are still in danger of having the steering wheel begin oscillating without warning due to the power electronic steering gear providing unintended and unwanted steering assist. It's surprising that the issue was actually caught at all. An audit last November looked at software part numbers applied to patched up vehicles under a sample of field service actions. When the data came back insufficient, the audit was expanded and found that about 2% of the vehicles recalled weren't actually fixed. Luckily, no injuries or accidents have been reported. Anna, this is kind of like a shocking clerical error from like a major automaker. I mean, is this an example of kind of believing that software is foolproof?
I don't think anyone believes that. I was heartened a bit by the fact that they had such a strong paper trail that they were able to figure this out quickly.
Instead of recalling all of them again.
Right. You know, they were able to drill down to just those couple hundred. So I guess kudos there.
Okay.
You know, Ford's really had a rough week. We talked a couple weeks ago, and I can't remember which podcast it was on, but about how automakers tend to cluster their recalls all together.
Oh, yeah.
So they can avoid all the scrutiny of just, their one recall.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of just,
like hiding in plain sight.
Yeah, like hide in the middle of the pack.
Mm-hmm.
So Ford dropped 8 recalls in one day this week. Yeah. That was since this Ford Mustang issue occurred. There were 8 more in one day. The Maverick had 5 on its own.
Okay.
The F-150 Lightning needs a fix. The EcoSport was included, but perhaps most hilariously, Ford again recalled a vehicle because of a problem with a prior recall.
Oh.
Yeah. So 234 of the Mach-E version of the Mustang were recalled because the high-voltage battery main connectors were not properly fixed during a prior recall. So either this is a more common occurrence than we think, or it's just more common for Ford. I don't know. I mean, on the one hand, I feel good, like I said, about the scrutiny that's being applied to this because they seem to know what's happening there. They're not just like sending people out and you never hear from them again.
Yeah.
But maybe we're hearing from them too often. I don't know.
Yeah, that is a little surprising. I guess at least the numbers go down. I mean, you think like 232 vehicles, but still something like making sure the connections on the battery are tight or whatever. You know, you think you got to get that right on an EV.
Yeah, you would want to do that. And then there was another, the one on the F-150 Lightning was a little bit alarming too. It was like they're worried that the batteries are going to short because they're overheating. So they're telling you not to charge past 80%.
Oh, yeah, that's a bad one too.
So get that one done.
Yeah, check that one out. Make sure, check your app.
Check
See
your
if you
app.
have any outstanding recalls. Jeff, one thing that kind of stood out to me is that the nature of this is how all of a sudden it'll make your steering wheel move or oscillate. It makes me think of how now you have lane departure or lane assist, where your steering wheel a lot of times in cars is already kind of moving on its own already. And so you might not know that it's moving incorrectly and like sending you into another lane. Like, I don't know that. I was thinking about it the day after we ran this story because I was in the car, had the cruise set, lane assist, and it was kind of just bouncing. It kind of bounces you back and forth, line to line. And I was just like, if this just all of a sudden went AWOL, it would take me a hot minute before I was like, oh, wait, oncoming traffic.
It would take you a minute to realize that?
A hot minute. So like, let's say a nanosecond.
I don't like those guys. I turn that off.
I do turn them off too, but like sometimes, if you're driving late at night or something like that, it's nice to have them on.
Yeah, I mean, this is a bad one. When you look at this whole recall here with the power control module, power steering control module, that is a scary one. I would agree with you 100%. And as we do, to your point, as we get into more of these technologies that we're trying to implement from a safety perspective, to have to recall those things is concerning. To Anna's point too, it's great, and I agree that we have all of this transparency and traceability that we can see when we screw up a recall. But we should also be able to apply those things from a quality control perspective before the vehicle goes out the door. So there is sort of a counterbalance there in terms of how we're using a lot of this traceability technology that we have. When it comes to this one in particular too, I just kind of wonder, after talking last week about the Camaro and how the decision was made not to come out with a new model year because sales were down, and that type of vehicle, there just isn't that social connection to it anymore.
Yeah.
You kind of wonder internally, does that play a role here with Mustang too? Yeah. The more recalls, and we're talking about 3 different recalls now, where are we going here? Because this isn't a core demand of their customer base. They're still selling a lot more SUVs and a lot more trucks. Is Mustang still a passion project for Ford? If it's creating more issues and more quality control concerns, does that raise some internal questions? Probably not yet, but you would think maybe it leads to some of that down the road. The other thing that came to mind here are some of the over-the-air software upgrades that we constantly hear about in terms of that being the next step. That kind of would have eliminated some of the back and forth here in this case. So being able to essentially push a button and send out the upgrade as opposed to having those vehicles come back in, or to rely on a technician to update that software to begin with, I think is also something to consider here. And, we go back and forth on Elon Musk. He is the one who sort of pioneered that approach, and maybe there's something to that.
Well, I think one thing with the Mustang is it's 100,000 cars, 100,000 vehicles a year, right? So it's still a lot. But I mean, they're also selling like 1.4 million. So overall, not a lot. And when you look at their total sales, the other is that when you do talk about those over-the-air updates, is that the software said everything was fine. So like maybe what is an over-the-air update? Would it have been the same where it said?
But the initial recall was because the technicians didn't install or upgrade the initial software.
Oh, that's why. Okay. I had that wrong. I thought it was that it said the software was updated, but not
right because
they didn't
update it.
They didn't do the update, but it said it was updated.
I know that they had to put it in there because the update was wrong. Put it that way. And if you got to push a button as opposed to relying on a person to do it, ideally that situation would resolve itself.
Okay. So Anna, I mean, this is the end of the recall dump, right? So now we wait till next month for the next batch, right?
I would assume there will be another dump, maybe at some point in time. And I should clarify too, I checked back on that F-150 Lightning, the details there, and it is regarding potential for an internal short circuit, but there's nothing in there about overheating. So just to be clear, that was
okay. Better safe than sorry.
Yeah.
Our next story is about the impact of tariffs on industrial manufacturing. A new article from Matthew Lextuktis, director of Officio, one of the largest procurement and supply chain consultancies in the world, discusses the latest round of U.S. tariffs. The tariffs have sent ripples through industrial manufacturing, significantly impacting production costs, supply chains, and overall competitiveness, especially in machinery and industrial equipment. Manufacturers continue to try and adapt to mitigate potential cost spikes and supply disruptions as everything seems to change on an hourly basis. Additional tariffs on Chinese imports, the suspension of the de minimis exemptions for Chinese shipments, the 25% tariffs on imports from Mexico and Canada. We go on and back and forth and stopping and starting. Lextuktis says, quote, uncertainty is the enemy of efficient and low-cost supply chain operations. So industrial manufacturers now face a double burden, higher raw material costs and the need for rapid reconfiguration. The article goes into great detail as to how tariffs might reshape the industry, key risks to manage, and actionable strategies for companies to stay competitive. Lextuktis says that the companies that thrive are those that take preemptive action right now, like diversifying your sourcing, investing in supply chain resilience, and leveraging new technologies to optimize procurement strategies. Anna, what were some of your biggest takeaways from this article?
Yeah, I think I was glad that the article emphasized the uncertainty part of it, because I do think that, to me, that's the biggest issue over this. Economists say that even the threat of a tariff is enough to cause businesses and consumers to start to pull back. And, you're seeing the disruption of this message in not just like the stock market, which has taken a big hit, but also just on the ensuing confusion that's come along with it. Just people don't know what's going to happen. And that, I think, causes a little bit of paralysis. And then, of course, the higher input costs that you mentioned. You look at industrial manufacturers, automotive, aerospace, users. These are heavy users of metal. So the metal part, that's a big deal for them. Most certainly, they're going to feel some pain there. And I think the risk is that stockpiling in response to that threat will cause a temporary bump. So the real impact of these policies is not going to be clear right away, which I think is another sort of challenge to that, is trying to read the tea leaves there. And then also, as we discussed last week, and you see laid out here, you will see some reshoring announcements coming from this. And he kind of touched on that. But by and large, I think reshoring it's kind of like a multi-year, very long-term strategic goal. It's very costly. And so to me, the reshoring commitments that are being made right now, they really feel like lip service to me.
Yeah.
I have to believe that these are maybe delayed announcements for plans that were already in play, perhaps to curry favor with the administration. I don't know. But, I don't see companies investing millions and millions of dollars to respond to the situation that is so fluid right now. It doesn't make sense. And then also, I think we have to remember, too, that 2022 and 2023 were like the biggest years on record for reshoring already. I mean, this was stuff that was already taking place. People were citing things like geopolitical risks, wanting to shorten their supply chains. Climate change is a big factor for some companies that are doing this. This was already underway. So, to me, the tariffs are much more downside than up. I mean, I'm sure that the Trump administration will want to take credit for any reshoring announcements or foreign direct investment that you're hearing about at this time or in the next month or two. But I think likely this would have happened anyway. And for every win, there's probably a loss on the other side of it. In my opinion, like, if we reported on Honda announcing that they were going to move they were going to nearshore some of their Civics. Take that out of Mexico and start to produce those in the U.S. Okay, all right. But, on the other hand, like I saw this week that Lindt Chocolate Company said that they were going to completely pull the U.S. factories out of their Canada supply. So they're only going to sell chocolate to Canadians that came out of their European facilities when they used to do it from their American facilities. Like all that stuff. I mean, it's such an interconnected and global network at this point in time that there's so much gray area. Mm-hmm. And I think that we're just beginning to see like the fallout there.
No, and I think, there's that sort of period of calm leading up to the inauguration, and then maybe a few weeks to a month afterwards where there's really no news coming out of any manufacturer or any company, kind of just like waiting for things to settle and then make the announcement and maybe curate that announcement based on the current landscape.
Why not time it?
Things that they were already doing, like, hey, we were already going to do this, but maybe if we announce this a little bit after the inauguration, maybe we could curry a little favor. Jeff, so I was trying to look up Matthew Lextutis, so that way I could get his name right. And clearly that's worked out so well. But I stumbled upon this podcast where he was talking about how this lack of clarity has procurement professionals scrambling, and he really suggests running a lot of these if-then scenarios so that way these companies know how to respond to these changes. And I mean, we did a couple of podcasts, like one-off podcasts about risk management and how like basically there's an entire industry that is running these if-then scenarios so that way companies can be a little bit more prepared. Do you think that, some of these if-then scenarios, they just got to be running through pretty much anything. Just like, okay, so what if this decision is made and then completely reverse the next day, but then they go and do it again the following day?
Well, it does. I think one of the things that COVID-19 and 2020-21 showed supply chain professionals was the need to be fluid. Yeah. Because we learned in the Army, flexible is too rigid. Yeah. So remain fluid. And I think that's what is being put in place here. I think I don't want to be too redundant from a lot of things Anna said because I agree with her and we've talked about this before, but there is so much wait and see to go on here that a lot of these contingency plans have to be put in place. And I think that was the biggest takeaway that I got from the article is you just got to be prepared for pretty much anything right now. We really don't know how this is going to shake out because that's what President Trump has sort of demonstrated a propensity for. He likes having that unknown element and shake things up and you never know what's coming next, which does lead to disruptions. I think the one thing is everybody that I've talked to and anybody that's offered input on supply chain and tariffs, there is going to be some immediate pain. Yeah. There's no way around it. Yeah. Costs will go up. We just don't know exactly where and how much. Yeah. So we know that's coming in the short term. So I think universally, you have to anticipate that. Long term, there's going to be a real even ebb and flow. And I think even though it's very easy to be negative about these tariffs, I do think when you apply them universally, there is a lot of bad stuff. Mm-hmm. But over time, ideally, we'll identify areas where we can use these tariffs to leverage to even the playing field and make it better for U.S. manufacturing. I agree with that. As I've said before, coming out full force, this hot, this heavy, and across the board is wrong because it creates a lot of unnecessary pain and disruption. Yeah. So hopefully over time, we'll get that figured out and there will be some more consistency with a lot of what we're seeing here. In the meantime, you do have to plan. I agree with what Anna said about reshoring. I think a lot of these things were put in place beforehand. I think it was very interesting during President Trump's speech to Congress. He talked about talking with the big three automakers right before then, and they were all on board and excited about what was going on. And then yesterday we reported how those auto tariffs, those are going to wait a while. Yeah. We're going to push those off for a month. Yeah. So again, a lot of fluidity. Hopefully there's more of that because it will help us do things correctly as opposed to taking these broad stroke approaches that can set us back.
Well, and we've had a lot of tariff coverage over the last 2 weeks. You had the piece with sort of a bunch of different people in the logistics industry. I thought that was a really good piece for everyone to check out, talking about that immediate pain. We also ran a piece from Mike Collins, and he goes really into depth as to like, okay, we could use tariffs specifically here. Mm-hmm. We could use this right here for IP intellectual protection. He talks, he had the entire piece about the de minimis loophole. So I guess I do wish that it was a little bit more calculated, right? Rather than just like 25% across the board. Wait, what'd you say? 25% across the board except for these guys, but another 10 over there. Wait, no? Okay, not 10 over there. We're going to put 10 over there. And it's just, I don't know. I think that, Anna, to your point, I think that's why we've seen a lot of, let's say, market instability ever since. Okay, our next most popular story. Boeing closes first shadow factory. About 2 weeks ago, we discussed Boeing's new effort to close shadow factories in Washington that fix, maintain, and update planes instead of building new ones. The company had 2 sites still working on some 115 aircraft, one that services 737 MAX jets in Moses Lake, and one that was working on 787 Dreamliners in Everett. The Seattle Times recently reported that Boeing is already closing its Everett location. Mechanics wrapped up work on the remaining Dreamliners that were waiting for small gaps at the fuselage joins to be repaired. Boeing had to fix 122 Dreamliners that had these paper-thin gaps, and the work stole time from hundreds of workers. Now, the aircraft can be delivered, and the many workers can move on to new projects. The 787 project alone chewed up nearly 5 years of rework. Those workers in Everett are actually going to be reassigned to the 777 MAX program, the 777 program. The Shadow Factory in Moses Lake is still working on 737 MAXs. As of early last month, about 55 planes still needed attention. So, Anna, do you find this news encouraging? Maybe even a little surprising regarding the quick turnaround? I mean, just 2 weeks ago, we were talking about, okay, how, when, and if will this all happen? Mm-hmm. And is Boeing actually closing the gap?
Yeah. I mean, it was, I guess, encouraging to see this happen so quickly. However, Boeing is still dealing with a lot of problems right now that result in delays for them to get that product out the door. And we've covered, just in the 2 weeks since we first talked about the shadow factories, we've covered Air Force One is dealing with these dramatically inflated timelines to the point where the president is considering canceling that order. Mm-hmm. We also reported that both Boeing and Airbus have had deliveries just sitting around waiting for, clearance on some new equipment that they're putting in to expand their first class cabins. Mm-hmm. So cabinets and doors and things like that need to be certified. And that's actually preventing those planes from getting to market, which is kind of a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
So I guess it just seems like whack-a-mole for Boeing at all times. Yeah. And so this is one mole whacked.
Yeah.
I just don't know how long it lasts.
That's what they called it internally too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is one mole whacked. They said that on the earnings call.
Yeah.
It's a common phrase.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know how long it lasts. I stand by my theory that, from the last time we talked about this, that I just don't they have to remove, this bottleneck, of course, and get these reworked planes out of there. But I am not so optimistic that they've just solved their quality problems to the point where they're just churning out perfectly complete planes and they're not going to have a need for stuff to come back and work on that further. So I'm not sure that they're not going to have a problem with production activity overlapping with rework going forward. I feel like they still will.
Well, to your point, I mean, it was not reassuring to hear that they were even debating whether this was a real problem to solve. It's no, there's a gap here. Okay. Well, I don't know. I'm not an aerospace engineer. I leave a lot of the complex technical mathematical stuff to David.
Yeah, and I understand. So, I mean, basically, there was a whistleblower that said this could be a catastrophic event. Basically, Boeing said, nah, it's fine, but we're going to fix it because it's out of spec, not for any other reason.
Yeah, that doesn't instill a ton of confidence that this company has figured things out, or to use Anna's terms, whacked all the moles.
Yeah,
so many moles.
Maybe
too many
this mole is not yet fully whacked, Jeff.
Maybe not. Well, and it's a big issue because they have a huge backorder situation. They've got over 6,000 planes on backorder, and when you look at, ideally, they can shift some of these labor resources to get some of these planes out the door. But when we go back to all the tariffs we were just talking about, 80% of these 737s, of which they have over 4,000 on back order, they're 80% aluminum. We get half of our aluminum from Canada. So if they're already stressed over all of these backlogs, over cost overruns and everything else, tariffs aren't going to help their case a whole lot.
No.
So you wonder what kind of impact that's going to have, and if that's going to even stretch things out longer for them in trying to get these planes completed and get back up and running the way they want to be.
Well, and we joke about the mole not being fully whacked, but it's kind of like how you can close the shadow factory, but like you still have a little bit to do there. Like, sure, all the top talent that they said that are there, they can move on to another program. But one of the small caveats is that, yes, these gaps are fixed and they can now be delivered. But many of them were sold to other customers or airlines. And they have new planes, and so now they all need to be repainted. They all need new interiors. One Boeing exec, as reported by the Seattle Times, said that these reworked planes will be delivered over the course of this year and next. So it's like, yes, we definitely closed the shadow factory. However, there may be still some things in there yet to be delivered. So I think it's a step in the right direction, only because, as we've seen, let's just say over the last couple of years, I was just like, oh my goodness, how long is this going to take? And then 2 weeks later, they're like, did it, done. Moving on to Moses Lake. That one's going to be shut in a week or two. But so, encouraging.
We'll try to take it.
Yeah.
Better than average.
Yeah. This just in. Oh, wait. It's going to cost airlines more money. Another carve out for tariffs. No, not yet. Okay. Our next most popular story. Volvo buyers claim new vehicles came with counterfeit parts. Volvo buyers in China recently found, let's say, some irregularities. According to Car Scoops, owners who bought S60 sedans with premium speakers from Boeing and Wilkins actually had parts from, or Bowers and Wilkins actually had parts from Bowers and Vilkins. Instead of a W, it had two V's. It was really actually pretty clever. You know? Many Volvo buyers have claimed to find similar problems, like a gear lever missing a light-emitting feature. Now, the people want to know if these counterfeit products were installed intentionally. Volvo China says the company, quote, attaches great importance to the irregular behavior in the new car sales process reported by some customers, and the company apologized. Volvo has also launched a special investigation to find out what happened. The company allegedly uses, quote, a strict full-length traceability management system for original accessories. They even went so far as to blame dealerships. So, Anna, what happened? How can counterfeit components make their way into a system with, quote, strict full-length traceability? I mean, is this kind of a hand in the cookie jar sort of situation?
I don't know. So, I mean, yes, clearly Volvo was passing the buck when they say that they're reviewing irregular behavior in the new car sales process. That's like, okay, the dealer did it, right?
Yeah.
But they may have a point, and that's because other reports have suggested that it was unclear whether the complaints had a common dealer thread, but that the first person to raise the alarm on this, they said the sound system was provided to them as a free upgrade when they bought the vehicle. Ooh. Suggesting, in fact, that it could have taken place at the dealership. I'm glad you're a little
he is really interested in that
tidbit,
yeah.
right? Yeah, yeah. So,
that was genuine. That was a genuine ooh.
Yeah. Okay.
I wasn't leaning into that one. I was just like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. My bad.
And get this.
And there's more.
So I think, like, if you're in automotive, obviously dealers represent you to the market. It's hard for buyers to separate the two, a Volvo brand from what they get from the dealership. So for Volvo, I think there's only so much buck passing that they can do regardless of where this took place. And I know that if it doesn't create any less of a brand impact for Volvo, if it's the dealer's problem, then at least maybe it's a easier problem to solve, like especially if they do have this kind of traceability in place that they say that they do.
Yeah.
I think likely they do. They're a major automaker, so they should be able to figure out what happened here and then figure out why and where it happened and then put a stop to it. But no doubt, even if they find the source of the problem, I just feel like, as the article points out, like maybe the damage is already done. Speakers are one thing, but if customers feel like more critical operational type components are potentially counterfeit in their vehicle, that would be a major deterrent for buyers. Even if they're not, even the suggestion of that, I think, is going to be a big problem for Volvo. And how do you walk this back? It just seems like I don't know. It's a huge problem.
Especially when those components look like they were purchased off of a rug lying on the street in
New York City. I know.
Yeah.
Like it's like just such a bad look. And this is a luxury vehicle, really. I mean, it's just not. It's not what you want.
Jeff, one of the original publications, Sohu, I believe, and this is via Google Translate, said, quote, "This incident quickly fermented on the internet."
Fermented.
And I just thought, what a great way, maybe the best way to describe what happens to information on the internet. It ferments.
Absolutely. And, Volvo in China, it's kind of an interesting history there when you look back. I mean, Volvo is now owned by Geely, a Chinese company. And since Geely took it over, Volvo sales in China have just skyrocketed. If you look even as recently as 2016, they sold about 40,000 vehicles in China. In 2023, that was up to 170,000. So the growth was huge. But then in 2024, they saw about an 8% drop. Okay, so we saw this going backwards. The reason I think that's interesting is whenever we see companies sort of falling off pace in a very, very competitive market, it's real easy to start rounding off corners. What can we do to get this stuff out quicker? What can we do to preserve costs? What can we do to make the bottom line look better? This just seems like a real symptom of that type of behavior, which when you're dealing with Volvo, which is a brand focused on safety and reliability, and to Anna's point, a luxury vehicle on top of that, this type of thing could be hugely damaging to that brand. In China, especially, China is their number one country for sales. Okay, when they look at sort of putting everything together, they put Europe and then China, US. So Europe is a bigger market, but China is the leading country in which they sell in. So yeah, not a good look. It is fermenting. Brand fermentation on the internet is not always a good thing, especially not in this instance.
No, I mean, Sohu said this is triggering strong dissatisfaction, widespread doubts from car owners. The, quote, copycat audio incident not only caused car owners to seriously question brand credibility, but also damaged the image in the entire market. Industry insiders pointed out that this incident exposed serious problems in brand management and channel control. And I was also just wondering what's the low-hanging fruit there when it comes to just making a knockoff based on how the letters line up. So I was thinking like a Toyota Sienna, because of the two N's making an M. Maybe a Toyota Yanis, Gatorade, maybe a Samsung Galaxy. I was really having a lot of fun.
Did you do this or did your wife?
Oh, I was just doing this. Actually, it completely derailed my podcast preparation.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, this is how you spend your time?
I mean, let's not say a lot, but not, still a significant chunk.
So
the list could have gone on for a while, and I was like, you know what? Stop there and move on. You can circle back. And luckily, I stopped there.
After the graphing calculator was invented, David had a lot more time.
Our most popular story this week: microfactories could build a new home every 12 hours. All right. So ABB Robotics recently partnered with Automated Architecture, or AUAR, a UK construction technology company, to build ConstructThor. ConstructThor is a new research facility in Belgium that showcases the future of sustainable construction. The companies want to automate building processes with robotic mobile microfactories that build cost-effective and high-quality timber frame panels for walls, floors, and roofs. AUAR's automated construction system uses ABB's robots for modular assembly. The robots use vision and AI capabilities to boost speed, flexibility, consistency. Panels and housing structures can be made quickly with reduced waste. According to the companies, a robotic microfactory can make the core and shell of a single home in less than 12 hours, which can then be quickly assembled on site. Anna, robot-built homes, do you see them as more or less promising than homes 3D printed directly on site?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, they're both promising. I don't think we have to pick.
Yeah, I mean, they're both great developments solving industry-wide problems that need attention.
For sure. And I think the construction industry is a really interesting industry to watch right now, because I think we're seeing a lot of changes to home building in the next decade or so. For one, we've seen a lot of at least introductory type tech or prototyping or whatever you want to say that targets the really high labor component that exists in construction. And, some of that is focused on more like modularity and factory built homes like this is, the use of 3D printing, as you mentioned, the automation of heavy equipment. All of that stuff is really a factor, I think, or even some of the functions inherent in the process, like repetitive stress activities like lifting and, demolition, like all of that is being targeted in some way by leading technologies, which is interesting. You're not seeing a lot of adoption of it now, but down the road, I think it's an industry that's ripe for that. And then I think secondly, considering that the change in demographics that is coming, there's a lot of interesting stuff. I just read this report about the housing market and the impact that baby boomers exiting the housing market is going to have on the housing market.
Okay.
And it was interesting, but they were talking about because the population size is so large and baby boomers are the largest holders of real estate at this time. When they exit the market, which largely will take place likely in the next 10 years or so, that it might create enough of a glut to reduce housing starts significantly and lower the price of homes and create some downward pressure on
sort
the
of
value.
A market correction.
Exactly. Yep. So even the value of your home could, either table off or go down.
Yeah.
So if the market does shrink because of that, I think you might see industry trends towards companies that are trying to maybe automate or use other leading technologies to produce more efficiencies because they need to reduce expenses by automating some of that labor out, adding speed to the process. So they might look at things like partial factory builds when they weren't doing that already.
Yeah.
So I do think that it is coming to construction. I don't think it's happening tomorrow.
Yeah.
But there are some interesting factors in play that might make that accelerate eventually.
Well, I like this because AUAR actually licenses this microfactory concept and all the digital technology involved to home builders. It starts around $300,000 with an ongoing licensing fee. But Jeff, they said last year the system cut labor costs by 30% and supply chain and transport and logistics costs by 80%. I mean, those are real critical issues to the construction industry. This could be a solution.
Maybe. No,
Jeff,
help me
not.
out here because I would actually like to be more optimistic about this. When I first saw the headline, I'm like, this could be a real solution to people getting into homes because home prices, especially in the U.S. here, have gone up so much.
Yeah.
I mean, especially in our county, home prices have gone up a ton. But then when you look at everything that's still involved here, $300,000 just to license the technology.
Yeah.
It's not buying the land. It's not hiring a contractor. It's not materials. There's still a ton of costs associated with this on top of using the technology. So right now, this doesn't look like a good solution to me, unless they can figure out a way to bring down these licensing fees. And what is the ongoing licensing cost?
Well, I mean,
What is
basically,
that?
this is like home construction as a service. Basically, as a contractor, you would bring a micro factory in and use that to build modules for your builds.
But then why do I have to pay an ongoing fee?
I mean, it's honestly like software as a service. So like you pay the licensing fee.
But once the house is built, unless this is going to cover putting on a new roof in 10 years,
Yeah.
like I don't get that.
No, the contractor pays the ongoing fee.
Right, because they're never going to pass that along to anybody else.
Wait, are you saying that this sort of subscription type fee doesn't work for you?
In this instance, no. Not when there's other better options. I don't think it's a better option right now.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot that would need to be done here to make this competitive. I do like the 3D printing stuff.
Yeah.
And I think there's been a tremendous amount of improvement just in general construction in terms of their processes and the things that they do to be more efficient. So when we look at what this is supposed to do, it also doesn't talk about scale. What about the size of the house? What about the location? All of these other things that are also part of this are sort of brushed over and not discussed as part of the ongoing costs that make it so hard for somebody who's just starting out to get into a house. So I don't know how this solves a lot of problems right now.
So this solves the problem for contractors building the houses because it takes all the most common pieces of it and basically automates all of it. So it's making all these, let's say, different blocks that can then be assembled together really easily on site. The one thing for me, the biggest issue that I thought jumped out to me was material differentiation, just because in the construction industry, this board is not the same as that board, and that could be really difficult to automate. But I mean, if you're just making a wall, you take all these materials from over here, go into the robotic cell, and you have the wall right here.
Or if you're like a contractor that builds neighborhoods and you have 5 floor plans and all you need to do is just churn out those same products over and over again, that is like a factory.
But we have that already.
Application.
But this is a more efficient way of doing it.
But it costs a lot more.
I mean,
for the contractor.
I mean, maybe
who's going to absorb all that?
Well, you're not going to absorb all of it.
But I absorb a lot of it.
It's spread out across 50 homes that they're building.
Yeah,
it's not like you have to pay this to have your house done.
Yeah, so you pay a one-time fee of $300,000 and then whatever the ongoing licensing fee is. But if you talk about the cost of labor, I feel like that winds up being really reasonable really fast. Just in terms of how much more efficiently you could do it. I mean, and not just homes, but all these mixed-use buildings that all look the exact same and all go up the exact same way. If you just have these robotic or these automated cells churning out pieces that you go and kind of put together, I don't know. I think it takes a lot of waste out. And the idea that, essentially you could bring these micro factories even closer to, let's say, the development, I think that could be a big deal too. I don't know.
Jeff said no.
I'm not buying right now.
Gotta visualize it.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not buying right now.
You know what? It's just a no. It's just a no.
I think there's way too many things that are not concrete, that are not well defined enough for me to get 100% behind this.
Well, no, this is wood.
There's got to be some concrete too.
All right. Before, in case you missed it, we have another word from our sponsor. This week's episode is brought to you by ShopVue, a CAI Solution. Managers and engineers face a wide variety of obstacles on the plant floor that weaken productivity. The root of these problems can often be tied to reliance on outdated data. Using yesterday's information to make today's decisions simply won't cut it. So download Benefits of Real-Time Production Monitoring in Manufacturing to find out why real-time production monitoring is becoming a must-have for manufacturers. All right. In case you missed it, the stories that maybe not as popular on the website, but still stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward. Anna, what do you have for us this week?
I selected a story titled "New Stove That Plugs into Normal Wall Outlet Could Be Major Gain for Health and Climate." I thought the headline was kind of funny because it just sounds like "durr."
Yeah.
Like a stove that plugs into the wall. But that's so anyone who's installed a stove understands that when you buy a stove, you need a very special outlet for it. It's a 240 volt outlet. You can't just plug it into the wall.
Yeah, it's not plug and play.
So a California startup called Copper is manufacturing a new type of electric stove and oven that could simply be plugged into a regular outlet. And they say that it runs on 120 volts, meaning there's no need to call an electrician. That can be like a multi-$1,000 job to get somebody in and put in do the rewiring to get that 240 volts. So, I was like, oh, cool. In the case of gas stoves, they say that about half of the flames heat escapes into the room. They're not very efficient. Electric stoves, by comparison, can be up to 80% efficient. Not to mention, we've seen some of those studies recently around what, quiet methane leaks are taking place in the home and the kind of air quality issues that are a consideration for some when it comes to gas. Mm-hmm. So this stove specifically contains a battery that is smart, meaning it can charge up when electrical rates are low, allowing people to cook without incurring peak rate electrical charges, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I picked this story because we just went through this. We ripped out our gas stove. We replaced it with an electric range and needed to add that 240 volt outlet. And it was expensive to do that. So while the story, it felt all upside as I was reading it until I got to the rub, which is that there's another mole to
you can only cook Cornish hens?
No, it's a normal size, nothing like that. But the copper stove, so outside of some municipal programs where they're trying to help defray the costs and incentivize these installations, it costs about $6,000.
Oh.
So remove one barrier and add another.
Yeah, the cost that it would take to install, they just piled on top of the cost of the unit.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, obviously, I think it's the scale that's missing so far. Maybe they could scale these up and get that cost way down, but you have to get it way, way down in order for it to make sense. So it just seemed like it was kind of solving one problem to create another. I like the idea of it because that is a barrier for people.
Yeah.
But yikes.
No, but I mean, we cover these stories a lot, right? Where it's a cool new technology. It's insanely expensive right now, but you hope that with economies of scale, things all come down and it winds up being a really good solution for everybody. I mean, you can always tell when somebody's doing some sort of work at home because it's like, hey, do you know any painters? Do you know any? You don't happen to? Is your husband an electrician? You got a truck? You can. I don't know. Like, so this is a really cool idea. I also like the idea of it being able to operate, like to charge and then operates during peak hours. I think that's really cool.
That's awesome.
I mean, I always do have like a little bit of skepticism of sort of over engineering some of these things, adding different features that, let's say, are more likely to fail than just, a simple basic oven. But I really like this idea. I think it's cool. And it's one of those things where you remember the first time that you found out there was like a different plug? You're just like, what do you mean?
Yeah, I found that out after I bought my electric stove. And then I was like, oh, we don't have that back there.
Yeah, no, we got to find a guy.
There's been a stove in front of it the whole time. I thought there was one back there, and there wasn't.
Jeff, what did you think of the story?
I just like it from a safety perspective because, I mean, you're not the only one who's ever run into that situation. And there are definitely people who have tried to jimmy rig something up to make that standard adapter fit into a 240 volt receptor. So, no, I like this. Anytime you can simplify things, make it more efficient, especially from an energy consumption perspective, this is positive. I'm confident we'll get this price down, especially as more players potentially get involved and embrace this. I think it's, wins all around.
Are you surprised that something like this hasn't happened yet?
Yes. Like, honestly, yeah, when you think about even with like washers and dryers as well. Like they've got the separate hookup as well.
Yeah.
I don't know why it would take this long to figure that out. I mean, just simplifying everything. I know some of the older homes that would have to like put a more traditional, outlet in, I guess, but that would be a lot easier going down than up.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure.
Just it seems like something that should have been streamlined a long time ago. Doug, who's watching us live, always good to see you, Doug, says induction stoves, 240 volt, are so much better than gas. I don't know. I happen to like a gas stove, but that's because I bought a house with a gas stove and I'm forced to like it.
And it's my stove.
Yeah. And it's great. It's great that the flame, no matter where I have it set, is always just a little bit bigger than my pot. And then I burn myself on the handle. Getting used to it. Still a work in progress. Sorry.
I feel like there's a real simple workaround there.
You know what? I think you just turn it.
No, you gotta get that water boiling. You got to get that water boiling. You need to cook that food because if you don't have that food done by 6 p.m., then all of a sudden you're pushing back bedtime and story time.
You can bring the pot like to the edge of the burner so it's covered.
You know how you can get your water to heat up faster? Get an electric stove.
Well, I mean...
Burn.
Well, no, that's the problem.
Burn.
Jeff, what's your in case you missed it this week?
All right, let's talk about nuclear waste, huh? We haven't ventured
let's
down that road in a while.
All
right, so I picked a story talking about the Supreme Court confronts national headache on what to do with the growing pile of nuclear waste. So the Supreme Court's going to hear arguments in a fight over plans to store nuclear waste at sites in rural Texas and New Mexico. Way back in the day, do you remember President Joe Biden? Seems like about a decade ago. But his administration and a private company with a license for the Texas facility appealed a ruling by the Court of Appeals that found that the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, exceeded its authority in granting that original license. So basically, everybody around these facilities is going, not in my backyard. We do not want this thing here. And the Biden administration, or now the Trump administration, in a rare turn of events, working together on the same front, are basically saying, no, we have an agreement in place. You got to take all this nuclear waste that's stockpiling up all over the place, and we have no place else to put it.
Yeah.
Initially, this was supposed to go underground, like in mountains in Nevada.
Yeah.
But guess what? People out there said the same thing. Not in my backyard. I don't want it here either. That project was mothballed and shut down right away. So now they're waiting for the court to rule on who's right in terms of who has the authority to grant access to storing this nuclear waste. I think this is an interesting story, not only because we see President Trump siding with something President Biden wanted to do, which is crazy.
Yeah.
We also see Democrats and Republicans alike sort of lining up in opposition to this, because if their constituents don't want it in their backyard, they're going to back them on that.
Yeah.
So there's really weird bedfellows here in terms of the two sides that are coming together to fight this out. Plus, we've been running stories on a lot of tech companies trying to re-engage a lot of these nuclear reactors in terms of powering data centers and other things that are going on right now, especially the evolution for AI. Nuclear power has always been championed as a more efficient approach. But you know what? It has this waste that comes from all the fuel that's used to create all that energy. And if we do go this route, we're already struggling with where to put the waste. What happens if we have more of these things?
Yeah.
What do we do with this stuff? We need sort of a national solution that goes beyond, hey, let's stick it in this place where there's nobody right now and they're willing to take it, because there's only going to be more of it.
Yeah. I mean, it is, and it's a lot. We're talking about like
40,000.
Yeah,
barrels.
like 5,000 metric tons of spent nuclear fuel rods from power plants, 231 million tons of other radioactive waste. And it seems odd where they want to put this facility next to an existing dump site that already has low-level radioactive waste, like protective clothing that's been exposed to it. This is... It's very shocking, but I guess it's the reality of when it comes to using nuclear fuel. Anna, what were your thoughts on this story, and whether or not we'll be able to find a suitable solution?
Yikes. I'm glad you brought this one to the podcast, because I did miss it.
Yeah.
This is crazy.
Yeah.
How long until we have some state put up a billboard and say, like, we'll take your nuclear waste?
Yeah.
There's got to be somebody.
We were kind of joking, but that's basically what we're waiting for, is somebody to say, you can dig the hole in my backyard, I guess, and throw it here.
Yeah. So it's either Texas or New Mexico?
Well, they want to use them both.
Oh, okay.
And both constituencies, as well as all of their representatives in Congress and the Senate, are saying, nuh-uh.
Well, I understand not wanting to be the radioactive waste capital of the U.S., but I will say, we're watching, we're reading Stuart Little right now. And it's an older book, and it is wild to see. They talk about waste management in New York City. And Stuart Little goes to the dock where they just push all the garbage onto a barge that goes out to the middle of the ocean and dumps it in the middle of the ocean. I'm like, okay, so we've grown. We've gotten a little better, and we'll get better. We'll get better with nuclear waste. Doug says, Yucca Mountain, no one will know. Just quietly move it there. That's a thought.
If they're cool with it, I mean, they could have it.
Yikes.
Nobody's fighting for it right now,
right? Gotta jack up those incentives.
Yeah.
All right. In case you missed it this week, was about the first 3D printed valve manifold assembly being installed on an aircraft carrier. HII, or Huntington Ingalls Industries, has announced that shipbuilders at its Newport News shipbuilding division have successfully installed the first 3D printed valve manifold assembly on a new construction aircraft carrier. The valve manifold assembly, a specialized part that allows distribution of a single source of fluid to multiple points on the ship, is installed in a pump room on the USS Enterprise aircraft carrier. The assembly is 5 feet long and weighs about 1,000 pounds and was made in partnership with DM3D Technology, a Michigan company that makes extremely big 3D metal parts, like a 10-foot rocket nozzle for NASA. Similar manifolds are planned for the USS Doris Miller aircraft carrier, and they're going to employ additive manufacturing rather than traditional casting methods because it reduces scheduling risk and improves efficiency. The shipyard has actually created more than 55 additionally additively manufactured parts installed on both new vessels and those currently in the fleet. and they plan to install more than 200 additional parts this year. Now, I chose this story because I thought we are starting to see a lot more of these metal 3D printed parts in increasingly mission critical applications. I thought this was really cool. When you look at the part when it's installed, you can only tell it's 3D printed if you're familiar with 3D printed parts. You're just like, you see it up close and you're just like, oh, okay. It clearly has the veneer of a 3D printed part. But I think it's really cool. And I think we're going to see a lot more of this. It also made me think of that story with the bad valve last week, right? And imagine if we had similar technology available where it was just like, hey, we need this part, pull it out of your CAD file and print a new one and kind of plug and play rather than trying to shoehorn something in. So a lot of exciting stuff coming out of there. We have a lot of additional 3D printing coverage coming up where we talk specifically about how the mill aerospace, defense, and shipbuilders are using these parts. So I just wanted to call attention to this story because I think it is really cool. And that is, Anna, that is one big part, a 5 foot long, 1,000-pound manifold.
Yeah, I looked at the story too, and the picture of it is crazy. You're just like, what? Yeah. I feel like can we stop calling this emerging technology, everyone? Like it just, I mean, some of this stuff, the applications where it's taking place is pretty incredible. And, you know, why not military where they have all the QC and, you know, it's just a great place to prove everything out, I think, and make people feel comfortable about what the capabilities are here.
Yeah. Well, I was recently talking to Phil DeSimone with Carbon, and he's actually kind of the same, like, let's stop talking about it being new tech and talking about the printers and stuff. Like they're actually talking about the applications you can do. Just because I think that some people get caught up in what it is rather than what it can do for them, you know, and they still think of it as emerging technology that's not ready for them. And you got to show them the actual applications like this manifold, Jeff. And I mean, it's not like it's going on to some gently used craft. You know, it's going on the USS Enterprise and the USS Doris Miller. So it's going to be in important places.
I think it's really cool because I think we're getting closer and closer to a point. With some units, it's already standard issue where they have 3D printing infrastructure already embedded into, you know, we're looking at an aircraft carrier here, which is basically a small community floating through the ocean. But even when we look at different units throughout the Department of Defense, whatever it is, again, this 3D printing technology, how quickly you can get to replacement parts, the cost savings involved, I think it's just going to be embedded within the operation. Just looking at my background, you know, coming from an infantry platoon, being able to print a new magazine, a new firing pins, a new canteen cover, whatever it is, right there to better have your soldiers prepared in the field or whatever the mission is. I think we're getting closer and closer to that. A lot of units have it already, but we're getting to the point where you're going to have a position where it's the 3D printer, essentially. Yeah. That's your supply sergeant. So I think that's really, really exciting, and what a great application for it.
Yeah, so the use of certified 3D printed parts has the potential to accelerate construction and delivery of these vessels to the U.S. Navy, cuts lead times, improves manufacturing quality for critical components. So, as we've said, we're only going to see more of this. All right. Our final thoughts before we get out of here this week. Anna, what's your final thought?
So we're on the cusp of one of my favorite weekends of the year, which is Spring Ahead weekend.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah. Because
wait, we lose an hour, right? We
lose an hour, but David, I lose an hour of sleep all the time.
I've been losing hours for years.
It doesn't matter at this point. I'm at an extreme deficit. But I love the extra hour of daylight. So even though we'll be going back to walking to the bus stop in the dark for a little bit, just having that extra hour at the end of the day for the kids to run around and be insane outside is the best. So I'm really looking forward to that. So by the time this gets to you, most of our listeners, I will be very satisfied with the sunset times again.
Wait, do we spring ahead Sunday?
Yeah.
Oh, Saturday night.
Saturday night. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, yes, I like it, but as I say every time around this time of year, like just adjusting your kid's schedule an hour, it takes some doing. It takes a minute for everyone to kind of, what do you mean? Because it's a very natural clock. But,
it is. But the older they get, the easier it is to just pivot from that. So you'll get there.
So my final thought, I got a bit of a two-parter, but I'll try to keep it short and sweet. So I did book the trip. I have booked the trip for spring break.
All of it.
I can't
All
wait.
of it.
I can't wait to hear about how weird it is.
All of it.
Because there's no way you're just like normally taking a flight like any regular person
I try.
from the place you want to come from to the place.
Really tried
at the time.
We tried to make it as logistically, and Jeff, I booked like everything. So my biggest mistake, I guess, was that I booked the VRBO first, which kind of locked us into, okay, these specific dates. Because then when I went to go book the flight, it was like, yes, these dates cost $400 a ticket. But if you would have done these dates, they'd be $100 a ticket or $130 or something. So that was the first one. Still, it's the kids' first flight, so I didn't want to have layovers.
Yeah.
So we were going to go down to O'Hare, fly direct from O'Hare to Fort Myers. Despite my, let's just say, I didn't want to, but I booked Spirit Airlines because it was just, when it came to saving money, there was just no equivalent. You couldn't get anywhere out of Madison or Milwaukee, anywhere close to that, and get a direct flight. So, but after I booked the flight through Kayak, Spirit doesn't use their own booking agent. It goes through like cheapflights.com.
Oh, here we go.
And I booked the flight. I'm booking the car, which is a completely reasonable F-150. I get a call on my phone like less than 5 minutes after I hit purchase, and it's this guy saying like, hey, I got a deal for you. And he's like, if you want to fly Southwest out of Midway the same day, we can do it for $100 more, but then you can sit together and you can have there won't be any baggage fees. And that was one thing that I was thinking about, because I'm like,
wait a minute, you weren't sitting together?
Well, we probably would have, but like to buy the seat on Spirit wound up being like $40 a seat to book it. So it's just like, we'll just roll the dice.
Yeah.
Like the entire plane's open.
My 4-year-old
do
will
not
sit
wanna
alone. It's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I figured that
finish your story, and then I'll give you some advice.
No. Well, so anyway, the guy, I think the guy who called me gave me the same advice. He's like, hey, listen, I looked at the plans that you booked.
They're crazy.
Yeah.
An alarm went off and I had to call you.
They're pretty bananas. But if you want to fly Southwest out of Midway, you get a carry-on. You get a carry-on and 2 bags per person, which really is kind of nice, because then it's like no longer are we thinking about, okay, everyone gets a personal item and then just everything goes into one big bag. And then I was just like, it seemed fishy. I actually at one point asked him, I was like, is this real? How can you prove this is real? Just didn't answer it and kept going. He's just like, well, I'll send you the email, and if you hit the link, then it confirms it, and we just switch it. And one thing that I didn't really think about is, do you remember where that near miss was last week? That near miss was at Midway.
Okay.
Where the Southwest jet almost hit the other plane.
Okay.
And I'm thinking that's why all of a sudden there was like a lot of availability. And I was just like, oh, that's unfortunate. But I don't know. I'm still encouraged that everything's booked. It was just really weird that 5 minutes after I booked it, somebody called and they're just like, hang on a minute. Let's completely change it from a different airport, but everything's, it should be all right. Just, another half hour in the car.
Okay, so first of all, I'm very proud of you for actually booking all of this in a reasonable time.
Yeah.
Before you're leaving your house.
Weeks out.
That's a great first step.
Yeah.
Can I offer you this advice as someone who has taken the family on many a trip?
Yeah.
All the extra costs,
you
will get back in the lack of frustration, the lack of possible hiccups in your travel. It is worth paying more because you won't have to you don't have to even risk having any of those things happen.
I did. That's what, he said it because it seemed weird to me. I'm like, I figured someone would call me with a better deal, but I'm like, you're kind of calling me to drive an hour more drive time and pay, more money. And he's just like, well, just bags alone. Like, one bag with Spirit, I think is like $70. So,
see, I wouldn't have flown Spirit Airlines with a family. If it's just me going on a business trip, roll the dice, like you said, a little bit.
Yeah.
But man, especially you got 2 small kids.
Well, and so what I was thinking is that the cost
airport booze is expensive.
Oh no, I'm bringing that all on my person. I'm gonna have before and after bags. I kind of had that baked into the cost because the airline tickets were so cheap that I figured I'd pay all those fees and still wind up less. But one of the problems with using those websites is that Southwest isn't on Kayak. So I had no idea my other options. And I really, but it was all good. It was all good. And I said it was a two-parter because I finally got my Valentine's Day present from my wife. And I just want to say it's the greatest shirt ever made.
So we have got, those are cats, right?
They are cats
Are
playing.
you swinging, what is this?
Are you getting this?
They're playing cricket.
Oh, that's a cricket bat.
So it's really like a perfect marriage of our marriage. She loves cats and I love cricket. And
Now you're wearing a shirt covered in cats.
Yeah, and it's just, I call this shirt love.
That's adorable.
It was the reaction, this startling reaction from people when I took my jacket off this morning was great. There were multiple audible
I think
gasps.
it's because this large gray tabby here looks really spooky.
A super
no.
serious cat.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's like they were animated for like the Casper, like the original Casper animated series.
Jeff, this one's real mad too. Did you see that one?
Ooh, looks
Yeah.
terrified.
I know.
They've all got
Spooky.
That one looks like a little bit like a shovel.
Yeah, I mean,
It's wonderful.
yes. It is just, there are very thoughtful gifts, and this is the most thoughtful one I've ever received. I love it. Good
It was
work.
super thoughtful for us too, Carrie, because it is hilarious. So thank you.
You're going to be seeing this a lot. We're going to wash it, but I don't think we're going to dry it because I think if this gets like a whisper close to heat, it is going to shrink into size. Like, it's
So maybe you should have worn it in the studio. Might be
I know.
shrinking
I
as
could
we
feel
speak.
it like tightening underneath the black sweatshirt. Jeff, what's your final thought this week?
Just real quick, not trying to preach, but there is a blood shortage going on. I just went and donated this last Saturday, and the cool thing there was my wife came with, and she's like, I can't believe how little time that took.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Walk in and out, I should have waited longer, after, but I always feel fine. I was in and out in like 20 minutes. So if you can, get in there, do your thing.
No, I have to. Like they keep emailing me, and I'm just like, I rebooked like so many times, and I just got to get back in there.
I have O negative blood, so I try to get in as much as I can.
I mean, that's one. They need all the blood.
They do.
They
That's
need
true.
all the
Yeah.
blood. No, that's a good call. All right, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Anna, Jeff, or David at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first, and subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine so you can join us live every Thursday. For Jeff Ranke and Anna Wells, I'm David Manti. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast, and we will see you next week.